Bitcoin is trading around $65,000, give or take. There's a lot of rumors going on with the speculation of Zach XBT releasing some expose tomorrow, apparently with some firm that's been very predatory against, basically trading against their users, right? And obviously there's this whole like Jane Street sort of lawsuit going on where basically it came out that they were the ones suppressing the price of Bitcoin. They were the ones that arguably caused the bear market of 2022, causing Terra to collapse because one of their employees basically moved on to, or I guess one of Terra Luna's employees moved over to Jane Street, and they created some sort of like internal chat that essentially led to them collapsing the whole price of the stablecoin, which led to Terra Luna collapse. Now, obviously that's just speculation, and I can't really, give any sort of definitive insight on that, but, a lot of stuff going on, right? And obviously with this whole like expose with Zach XBT, there's a lot of speculation that it's going to be either Meteora or Moonshot, which are both basically Solana apps. And pretty much it's just like the users getting traded against by the people that run these apps. And basically just like insider trader collusion, like extraction, right? And when you look at the whole landscape of everything, there's always a narrative as to why the price is what it is, right? Obviously, like I've been of the opinion that this cycle is not really different. I think that we're still in some sort of 4-year cycle, whether it's like a traditional one or not. And people love to point figures, right? Especially like when everything is super down, everybody's really, really depressed. People always need a reason for the price to go down, but there's never a reason for the price to go up, right? It's just like, whatever. And so the bigger question is like, is this sustainable, and should you trust this rally? Should you take on more risk? All that kind of stuff. Now, obviously I'm not a financial advisor. I just kind of give you guys a little bit of insight into like what I'm hearing and seeing. I'm not too convinced just yet. I think that we have a lot of major key areas, and this looks very, very indicative of basically just a bear market relief rally, right? Because you have all this like built up like short positions, and basically when you look at this from a bigger market like standpoint, right? Obviously we have stocks all-time highs, precious metals is rallying pretty much because there's just a whole mistrust in the whole system. And usually whenever there's war tensions, you tend to see the precious metals sort of rise up, right? And Bitcoin just hasn't caught a break, right? And obviously we have this whole like Binance fiasco too, where they're like allegedly they've been manipulating the price of Bitcoin as well. And this whole like October 10th, which was like the record level of like liquidations for reference, I believe like the FTX collapse was about $3 billion. Terra Luna collapse was, I think, somewhere around there. I think like on paper it was like a $40 billion sort of hole, right? But like that wasn't really like a true $40 billion. Basically the liquidation of it on October 10th was basically a $19 billion hole that was just filled in the market, or I should say taken from the market. And there's just a lot of people like speculating like what was going on. There was a lot of finger being pointed basically at Binance and CZs particularly. And now the narrative is kind of switching that maybe this was just Jane Street all along. They've also been exposed to have been buying the IBIT, basically ETFs, right? Like wherever, basically it's like your exposure to Bitcoin. Not to mention that they were also buying, or I think they're the biggest buyer of MicroStrategy. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why would the people in the firm like shorting Bitcoin? Why would they be buying these ETFs, right? Now, obviously you can make the case that maybe they're selling this and that's why you're creating this sort of like buy pressure. There's other people saying like, well, they're basically shorting the futures and then buying spot positions, right? So they're crashing the price of Bitcoin using basically these ETFs to kind of hedge their positions and maybe just like tank the price, right? Keep it where they want, and then they're accumulating spot positions of Bitcoin, right? Or the underlying assets. It's going to be very, very hard because they're obviously Jane Street is like they're a mammoth company, right? Like, and nobody knows the way that their firm kind of shakes out. Like nobody knows actually like how they're doing their algorithms and what they're basically using as instruments to trade. And so you can make the argument that maybe they were just trading paper Bitcoin. I don't know. And so again, it's just like, it's very, very messy. And I think that time is going to tell kind of like how this all kind of shakes out, right? And I think that we'll look back at this like a year from now and say like, okay, well, the price has been suppressed, and ever since they got served and they're like in a lawsuit, allegedly they're deleting their tweets. The price just basically shot up from Bitcoin, right? You could also make the argument that maybe all these people that were in massive short positions, maybe they're just taking profits, and this is sort of the, sort of relief rally, because the market makers, they do need participants in the market in order to basically extract like value, right? Because Generally speaking, like these exchanges, they make money based off of trading fees and liquidating traders. Now, obviously, people have been like massively short. Everyone's consensus now is like we're going to go to 30K Bitcoin and like crazy price predictions for even altcoins, right? And just like all the geniuses, like when we were like trading at like $120,000 Bitcoin, everyone was saying, oh, we're going to go to like $200,000, $300,000. The super cycle's back on. It's the same people saying like, okay, we're going to go back to like 30K. And again, like my friend texted me today. He's like, hey man, like I want to get back into the market. What do you think is going on? Like I also like, he's like asking me like how to leverage trade, and like he actually wants to short this. I'm like, dude, like you've never shorted in your life. You don't know what you're doing. And respectfully, like I think that a lot of people are kind of like feeling this way because it's like, okay, well the price is just only going to go down. And I think that the time to have shorted was like a little bit, you know, a while ago, right? Like surely not at like $69,000 where we're like, you know, 40% off of the highs, right? I think that you always want to be always taking the contrarian trade. And right now the contrarian trade is basically to the upside. I also think that retail basically got like washed out and priced out of the market. So I do think that it's going to make sense to basically entice people back into the market by pumping up the price and making FOMO happen. And then from there, we'll kind of reassess what's going to go on. Now, obviously in the bear markets, we always see these sort of counter trend rallies. And it's really, really crazy because obviously Bitcoin, I can see it going up to like, you know, $83,000, maybe even 85 because there's a CME gap around there. And that would mean that the altcoins are going to actually catch like a major bid. Like they're going to outperform probably like a factor of 2 to 3x. And that's going to be enough FOMO, I think, to drive the market and make people think that we're back. Now, I'm not saying that we're not back or anything like that, but you know, if you were somebody who was a whale that could manipulate the price and you want participants, what exactly would you be doing, right? And so I do think for the short term, the max pain is to the upside. Obviously, Nvidia today crushed earnings. So short term, I do lean bullish. I have been calling for a rally basically for like the last week or two, and things just kind of like, they've been very, very frustrating. And I get that. A lot of people have been asking like, what should I do? Like if I'm like on the sidelines or if I've still been holding spot. And in my position, like if you haven't sold by now, you're probably like, you probably never were, right? Like let's be honest, like you're probably not going to sell your spot. So, you know, there's just different strategies, right? I know people that basically borrow against their Bitcoin, which I don't advocate for. And whenever the market seems to turn around, they borrow against the Bitcoin at like a low loan to value. And then they start speculating on like altcoins to kind of outpace the market. And then they take profits, pay off their loan, and then they're left with more assets to accumulate. There's people that basically convert their Bitcoin for altcoins for more, I guess, like short-term returns if you're of the opinion that the market is going to go up. And then there's people that just kind of sit on their hands and do nothing because, you know, why would they? It's just, you know, market volatility. And when you look at the macro environment, I still think things are very uncertain. I do think that we're going to kind of avoid this whole like recessionary talk. Like I think that that's good to see. I think that the jobs data and like the economic sort of stuff that's being released, whether it's true or not, it is in favor of like the markets. And I don't think that the government can afford to have us go into any sort of like turmoil, right? Because the market is basically just like living on this whole stock market, right? And the whole like AI and robotics sort of plays. Obviously, we have the SaaS apocalypse going on with, you know, Anthropic and Cloud AI and OpenClaw and all that kind of stuff. And so I do think that the AI bubble, so to speak, is going to continue to, you know, get fueled by private equity and all that kind of stuff. I think that, like I said, I think that the president is basically just injecting adrenaline as much as he can into the market every single time it sells off. Real estate as well. I think that he's very sensitive to that because it's kind of like his track record. And like I said, we have midterms coming up. I'm not very optimistic that he's going to win. It typically is never the case that whoever is in power, they typically will lose midterms no matter what, right? That's just like the reality. Not to get political, but you know, I would venture to guess that, you know, both sides are going to try to give away money, right, to kind of entice like their parties to basically vote, and we'll see how that goes. And hopefully the crypto is a beneficiary of that. So I think to wrap this all up, barring a stock market collapse, which I'm not of the opinion that that's going to happen, I do think that Bitcoin is going to get a little bit of a breather. I would not take on more risk. I would not do, you know, any kind of over leveraging. I wouldn't do any sort of like loans. Definitely like no credit card debt. Like it's just like that is the worst thing you can do. And people time and time again learn that that's just not a good thing to ever experiment with. So with that being said, short term, bullish. We have to look for key levels. I'm going to be continuously updating you guys, which is why you're subscribed to the channel. And if you're not, make sure you are. I've been in crypto since 2016. I have made and lost millions of dollars in this, like learned from my mistakes. And with that being said, I will see you all soon. Bye.